I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.
Hello there. Price of Reason here with the series review. Ever since its premiere, it's no secret that I've been one of the biggest critics of NBC's Quantum Leap sequel series. While the original series that ran between 1989 and 1993 had interesting and creative ideas, solid writing, and a great cast, this new show has been very generic, poorly written, terribly miscast, with a heavy dose of modern-day trendy Hollywood agendas. To make matters worse, in my opinion, to date, the current series showrunner, Martin Jiro, has proven himself extremely incompetent at reviving this IP because he simply doesn't understand it or whatever made it great to begin with. And throughout the show's first season, most of Jiro's ideas were cheap storytelling tricks and J.J. Abrams-style mystery boxes, which is why by the end of it, entire seasonal arcs ended up being incohesive with no satisfying resolution. That's why in Season 1, we got a pathetic finale that was one of the worst hours of television that I've ever seen. While completely disregarding the lore and spirit of the original series, Season 1 also ended on a meaningless and open-ended cliffhanger, highlighting just how creatively bankrupt this entire production is. With all of that being said, Season 2, which barely got greenlit to begin with, still presented Jiro with an opportunity for course correction. While admittedly, it would be hard to fix all of Jiro's missteps from Season 1, but putting more emphasis on good storytelling rather than on lazy cheats and cheap gimmicks could have at least made the show a little bit more tolerable. In this video, I will go over the plot for the Season 2 premiere, discuss what I liked about the episode, what I didn't like about the episode, followed by my official score. Season 2 Episode 1 starts with Leaper Ben on a military plane in 1978, carrying top-secret cargo that's supposed to be transferred to New Delhi. When the plane is hit by missiles, he and his crew, led by Michaela Stone from Manifest, are stranded in enemy territory and the pilot of their aircraft is dead. Michaela convinces Ben to help her remove the top-secret cargo, which he then reveals to be a ton of bricks. Upon this discovery, the crew realize that the army lied to them about their mission, as they were just meant to be decoys, while a much more competent crew was actually chosen to transfer the real cargo instead. The reason for this is because all of the soldiers selected for Ben's group have at some point gotten in trouble with the army, making them, for all sakes and purposes, disposable. To make matters worse, a group of Russian soldiers arrive on the ground to capture them, but after neutralizing them, Ben comes up with a plan to contact their US superiors who could rescue them. But when it turns out that the Russians have figured out that their cargo is actually a decoy, Ben now has to keep them from finding the real plane with the actual cargo and shooting it down. After they conveniently succeed in doing all of this, random office guy person appears as Ben's hologram, telling him that Ben has been missing for 3 years and that the Quantum Leap project has been dissolved because everybody thought Ben was dead, and then the episode ends on a last-minute cliffhanger. Again. Now let's start with what I liked. Number 1. Less present day. One of my biggest criticisms of the show has been the modern-day Quantum Leap laboratory team that mostly takes away screen time from the leaps while contributing nothing in return. If we didn't see or hear from them regularly, it would already be a major improvement to the show. To its credit, this episode only features present day in a few brief flashback scenes, and while those scenes are dumb, useless, and unnecessary filler as always, at least they don't take up too much screen time. Number 2. Less disappointed fiancé. With the exception of a few flashbacks highlighting how she's the best, we don't see Ben's disappointed fiancé almost at all in this episode, and that's a welcome development because story-wise, this character has always been a storytelling roadblock. Basically, for the entire episode aside from the very end, Ben is on his own this time without any hologram at all. That means that he doesn't have to talk about his feelings with his disappointed fiancé every second, and he can actually focus on his mission. And while I would have preferred seeing Ernie Hudson at the end as Ben's hologram rather than random office guy person, not having Ben's disappointed fiancé there is always a win, so I guess I'll take it. Number 3. Ben is less of a loser. Another criticism I've had about Season 1 was how wimpy they made Ben act in almost every episode, that he never seemed heroic or charismatic. In this episode, there seems to be an attempt to correct that. Ben comes up with plans to help the crew and he carries himself in a more confident way, and while I did like that improvement, whatever we see here in this episode still isn't necessarily good enough. Perhaps it's because I still think that an actor of Scott Bakula's caliber was simply better cast in this type of action-adventure role than Raymond Lee, but also in part due to the episode's writing issues, which I will get to shortly. Number 4. The opening. As opposed to the original show, the opening narration here has always been very annoying and weak, and throughout Season 1, we heard a few different variations of it, narrated by Ben's disappointed fiancé, and they were all varying degrees of cringe. This episode's opening appears to be narrated by original series narrator Deborah Pratt, and yes, this actually did sound better and more in line with the classic narration. Now let's talk about what I didn't like. Number 1. The writing. As much as I can recognize an improvement in this episode, I still have an issue with the overall writing. Something about this episode still feels very clinical to me. Every scene needs the characters to go from A to B, but the execution often seems forced, with story ideas that either feel contrived, convoluted, or both. For example, according to Ben, the Russians find out that their cargo is fake late in the episode, so wouldn't that mean that it's already game over for them? Why exactly would he have time to keep them from taking immediate action once they were aware that Ben's crew was a decoy? The idea of blowing up that facility to get them from getting to the other planes doesn't quite seem logical to me because the Russians already had the intel and probably still could have used it somehow regardless. And even if, let's say, I did actually accept the story's logic, this still all felt very convenient for me. Too convenient. While this may not be the show's worst written episode to date, it's not exactly quality writing either. Number 2. Messaging. During Season 1, I had mentioned that the show doesn't know how to approach more sensitive issues in a nuanced way, and while this episode seemingly tries to improve on that front, it still ultimately fails. That's because social commentary should always feel organic, especially on a sci-fi show. In the scene where Michaela Stone tells Ben that the seemingly evil US Army put her on a suicide mission because she's a disposable woman, that feels way too modern day rather than an actual conversation between two people in 1978. In addition, Ben then bowing down to her and telling her what a stunning and brave woman she is also too much. We also have a different male soldier who tells Ben that the US Army considers him disposable because of his, preferences? Both of these scenes are very poorly written and feel like a 2023 Hollywood activist's fever dream, which actually makes sense as this episode's executive story editor is in fact a real-life activist. Now I've said it before and I'll say it again. You can address sensitive issues like this legitimately, but you need actual writers with real pedigree to do this successfully. In addition, I also think that this show's constant obsession with 2023 Hollywood agendas is over the top. People just want to be entertained and not lectured to, and this show doesn't quite seem to get that. This episode clearly wanted to criticize the US Army in a way that seems more bitter than anything else. Now, I'm not saying that the original show wasn't capable of criticizing institutions or figures of authority, but it always felt much more organic and not just cheap agenda peddling like we see here. Number 3. The ending. This episode could have been a chance for Jiro to do a soft reboot for this disgrace of a series, which was sorely needed here. Perhaps Ben could have suddenly had a completely different hologram, maybe even one that we've never seen before, with a complete reset of this entire series, and instead of Ben completely forgetting that his disappointed fiancé ever even existed, Jiro has decided to double down on this stupid telenovela drama. Based on what I've seen in promos, it seems like Ben's disappointed fiancé has moved on from Ben, and now has a different boyfriend. That means that for Season 2, Jiro has created a love triangle, so prepare to see plenty of scenes where people talk about their feelings again. All in all, I think this episode was one big sham. As a standalone episode, I suppose it was one of the better ones we've seen to date, but not only is that an extremely low bar to clear, its setup for the rest of the season seems like another serious creative misstep. If I had to give a grade where 60 out of 100 is considered a passing score, I would give this episode a 55 out of 100, which means that it's a fail. What did you think about the Quantum Leap Season 2 premiere? Did you love it? Feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel and also clicking on that wonderful notification bell. Thanks for watching, my friends. Thank you, and good day.
I am such an awesome guy. I make so many videos.